Welcome to the lecture Subjects and Verbs. I'm Margaret Students, and I'm going to show you how to identify subjects and verbs in a sentence. Let's begin by defining subjects. Subjects are who or what the sentence is about, and subjects are always going to be a noun or a word that substitutes for a noun. By definition, nouns are a noun will be a person, place, thing, idea, or concept. Substitutors for nouns can be pronouns, even gerunds, they're ing words that act like nouns, or even phrases or clauses that serve as nouns. We will be looking at phrases and clauses in substituting for single words later in another lecture. Verbs are words that show either action, that means doing, or state of being, and all that means is saying what something is, linking a noun to what is, either renaming it or describing it. Now we can start trying to figure out how to identify subjects. We can go about this in a variety of orders, but let me say that anytime you're examining a sentence, always read the whole sentence first before you start trying to make decisions about the sentence. Okay, so once you've read the entire sentence, in trying to find a subject, just ask yourself, who or what is this sentence about? Now sometimes that's not readily apparent. Either the subject's not at the front end of the front end of the sentence where it usually is, or there's just a lot of nouns and it's just a little bit confusing. Well, then you might want to first identify the verb. And we can identify verbs pretty simply. We can look for words that are showing doing or action in the sentence, and then we can look for words that are part of the be family, not be as in buzz, but be as in state of being. And I've got a list of those at the bottom of the page. Is, am, are, was, were, seem. And then look at these. Feel, appear, look, become, be. You might not expect feel, appear, look to be state of being verbs, but they can work as state of being verbs. Let's try it out. I've got an example here on this screen for you. I'm going to begin by reading the entire sentence. Will drew a silly cartoon about aliens. So if I ask myself, who or what is this sentence about? I have three nouns from which to choose. Will, cartoon, and aliens. The word will is at the front end of the sentence, so that puts it in the lead as a possible subject. But that doesn't always mean that a word is the subject just by being in the front end of the sentence. The next step in our process would be to see if there is a doing verb, a doing word in the sentence. Well, we have one. That word is the word drew. Now, if we were confused about which noun is the subject, we can use that word drew to find the subject. We can ask ourselves, well, who did the drawing? Who drew? And clearly here the answer is will. Okay, here's another example, and it's a little bit trickier. The family of singers could perform beautifully. Okay, if we ask ourselves, or I ask myself, who or what is this sentence about? We have two nouns that could be a possible subject, family and singers. So let's move on to find the verb. Well, if we look for a doing word in here, we have it. It's the word perform. Now this is a little tricky in that this verb has a helper with it. So here's an example of verbs running in packs like we discussed in the parts of speech lecture. So could perform is our entire verb. Now we can ask ourselves, who could perform? Well, wow, family could perform, singers could perform. The answer is family, and I'm going to tell you why singers is not the answer in the next slide. When students are trying to find subjects in a sentence, prepositional phrases can really get in the way of subject and can lead to mistakes in how we write our verb as singular or plural. Lots of possibilities toward error related to prepositional phrases. One thing that you have to understand, if we have a word doing a job inside a prepositional phrase, that word cannot do another job in the sentence. Now, prepositional phrases as a whole substitute for adjectives, adverbs, and rarely, but sometimes, nouns. But single words inside the phrase cannot. So how you can remember this is remember what takes place in a prepositional phrase stays in a prepositional phrase, just like you hear the commercials that says what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So an easy trick to making sure you find the correct word that is the subject is when you're looking at these sentences and trying to find subjects and verbs, mark out the prepositional phrases, and you'll be much more likely to find the correct word that's working as the subject. So you see here that I've marked out of singers, and then our only alternative as subject has to be family. Since prepositional phrases make finding the subject pretty tricky, I've given you some more examples. Here's another one. The boys in the band are handsome. I've marked out in the band. Now, if you are asking yourself, well, how do I find the prepositional phrase? Remember that prepositional phrases always begin with the preposition and end with a noun or noun substitute. So you can pull your list of prepositions out and see if you can find those words in the sentence. That's a great help. So if we mark out in the band, we only have one noun that could serve as the subject in this sentence, and that's boys. There's no doing verb in this sentence, but we do see, and we could check back at our list to confirm that, we do see a state of being verb, and that's are. The boys are, and handsome describes boys. The next sentence, the group of teenagers looked unhappy. We have another prepositional phrase of teenagers that could cause problems. So I've marked it out, and now we have the group. Group is our subject, and then we have the word looked. Now in this case, looked is a state of being verb. They're not looking at something, it's what they are. It means appeared or are unhappy. So we've got group, a state of being verb, and unhappy describing the group. In the third example, we have two prepositional phrases, of the students and in study groups. If we mark those two prepositional phrases out, we only have two words left, the subject and the verb, many gathered. Now here's a good example of a pronoun substituting for a noun. Don't let that throw you. So many is our subject, gathered is our verb. Okay, to recap subjects and verbs, the most important things I want you to remember include knowing that subjects are who or what the sentence is about. Subjects are often found at the front end of the sentence, and subjects can be nouns or words that substitute for nouns, even phrases and clauses that substitute. Verbs always tell us something about the subject, what it's doing, or it's a linking verb, a state of being verb that links us to what it is. Nouns and prepositional phrases cannot be the subject. Remember that. What happens in a prepositional phrase stays in the prepositional phrase. Now, if you remember these things, you're much more likely to be able to identify your subjects and verbs and move toward